Matthieu Ricard's early life is a story of intellectual privilege and artistic inspiration, rooted in a family that straddled the world of philosophy and art with grace and depth. Born in Aix-les-Bains, France, in 1946, Ricard was raised in an environment that constantly stimulated intellectual curiosity, creativity, and deep contemplation. His upbringing was far from ordinary, shaped by his father, the influential philosopher Jean-François Revel, and his mother, Jan Le Tumlin, a renowned abstract painter who had a profound spiritual sensibility. The blend of these two worlds, often seen as divergent, laid the groundwork for Ricard's later ability to bridge science and spirituality. The influence of Jean-François Revel. A philosophical upbringing, Jean-François Revel was one of the most prominent intellectual figures in post-war France, known for his sharp critiques of authoritarianism, Marxism, and totalitarian regimes. As a philosopher, journalist, and public intellectual, Revel's works were deeply analytical, emphasizing the importance of individual freedom, reason, and democratic principles. Growing up under his father's intellectual tutelage, Ricard was exposed to some of the most profound philosophical debates of his time. Revel's philosophy was grounded in rationalism and empiricism, a clear contrast to the spiritual path that Ricard would later choose. It's important to note how formative these early intellectual experiences were for Ricard. His childhood home was filled with books, debates, and ideas that wrestled with complex notions of politics, ethics, and the human condition. Ricard's exposure to such a rich intellectual atmosphere would have nurtured his analytical mind and prepared him for the rigorous scientific training he would later pursue. However, alongside this analytical foundation, there was a sense that something was missing. Revel's philosophy, like much of Western thought, was primarily focused on external structures, society, politics, governance, and less on the internal landscape of the mind, the subjective experience of consciousness, and the deeper questions of existence. Ricard later reflected on this tension, acknowledging the immense respect and admiration he had for his father's work, but also noting that the philosophical inquiries of the Western tradition often lacked the tools to explore the inner dimensions of the human experience. Western philosophy, for all its depth, struggled to provide satisfying answers to questions like, what is the nature of the mind? And what is the meaning of life? These were the kinds of questions that would eventually lead Ricard toward Tibetan Buddhism, where he found a more holistic approach to understanding human existence. Despite this divergence in their paths, the intellectual rigor instilled by his father remained with Ricard throughout his life. It is likely that the analytical mindset Revel fostered in his son helped Ricard navigate complex Buddhist philosophy and engage with the scientific community later in life. The capacity to think critically, to question assumptions, and to synthesize knowledge from different fields was something Ricard inherited from his father, even as his spiritual journey led him in a different direction. Jan Le Tumlin, art, spirituality, and the seeds of compassion, while Jean-François Revel's influence shaped Ricard's intellectual development. His mother, Jan Le Tumlin, was the source of his early spiritual sensibilities. Le Tumlin was not only a successful abstract painter, but she was also deeply spiritual, eventually embracing Buddhism herself and becoming a nun. Her art, known for its abstract and contemplative nature, often reflected her inner quest for truth and transcendence. Through her, Ricard was exposed to a different way of approaching life, one that valued intuition, inner exploration, and the transcendent aspects of human experience. Le Tumlin's artistic and spiritual influence provided a necessary balance to the intellectual rigor Ricard received from his father. Whereas Revel's world was one of logical analysis and external critique, Le Tumlin's approach was more introspective, focusing on the inner world of emotions, spirituality, and compassion. This dual influence created a fertile ground for Ricard's later pursuits, giving him both the intellectual tools to engage with science and philosophy and the emotional and spiritual depth to explore meditation and compassion. It's likely that the contemplative quality of Le Tumlin's art had a profound impact on young Ricard. Art, like meditation, is a form of inner exploration. It requires one to delve deeply into the subconscious, to wrestle with emotions, and to transcend ordinary perception to reach new understandings. Through his mother's art, Ricard would have learned to appreciate these inner dimensions, something that Western philosophy often neglected. Her spiritual quest also likely planted the seeds of compassion that would later become central to Ricard's Buddhist practice. Le Tumlin's decision to eventually become a Buddhist nun underscores the depth of her spiritual commitment, and it's worth considering how her example may have influenced Ricard's own journey. Her life was a testament to the possibility of blending art, spirituality, and everyday life in a way that was both deeply personal and universally meaningful. This balance between the artistic and the spiritual would later become a hallmark of Ricard's own approach to life, as he sought to integrate scientific understanding with spiritual wisdom. The tension between rationalism and spirituality, Ricard's early life, marked by the contrasting yet complementary influences of his parents, created a dynamic tension between rationalism and spirituality. On the one hand, there was the rigorous, empirical approach of his father, grounded in Western philosophy and the intellectual traditions of the Enlightenment. On the other hand, his mother's spiritual and artistic sensibilities offered a more intuitive, experiential way of understanding the world, one that placed a strong emphasis on compassion and inner growth. This tension is emblematic of the broader divide that exists in many cultures between science and spirituality. Western thought has often viewed these two realms as mutually exclusive, with science focusing on the external, objective world and spirituality concerned with the internal, subjective experience. Ricard's life, however, would become a living example of how these two domains could not only coexist but enrich each other. His early exposure to both worlds allowed him to see the limitations of each and the potential for their integration. In many ways, Ricard's eventual shift toward Tibetan Buddhism can be seen as a reconciliation of these two influences. Tibetan Buddhism, with its emphasis on both philosophical rigor and direct experiential knowledge through meditation, offered a path that bridged the gap between the rational and the spiritual. It was a tradition that did not shy away from intellectual inquiry but also placed great importance on cultivating compassion, wisdom, and ethical responsibility, qualities that resonated with both his mother's and father's teachings. Albeit in different ways, philosophical curiosity and existential questions. As a child, Ricard was surrounded by philosophical debates and intellectual conversations, many of which revolved around the nature of existence, ethics, and the human condition. It's easy to imagine young Ricard sitting at the dinner table, absorbing these discussions and perhaps even contributing his own thoughts. However, even at a young age, he felt that these philosophical explorations, while intellectually stimulating, did not fully address the deeper existential questions that haunted him. What is the mind? What is the meaning of life? Is there something beyond the material world? These were the questions that lingered in Ricard's mind as he grew older. While his father's intellectualism provided him with a framework to think about these issues critically, it did not offer the experiential answers he sought. Western philosophy, with its focus on reason and logic, often fell short when it came to addressing the subjective experience of consciousness and the deeper mysteries of existence. Ricard later reflected that these unanswered questions were what ultimately led him to explore Eastern philosophies and spiritual traditions. In Tibetan Buddhism, he found a system of thought that not only encouraged philosophical inquiry but also provided practical methods, such as meditation and mindfulness, for directly experiencing the answers to these existential questions. It was a philosophy that did not merely speculate about the nature of the mind but offered concrete tools for understanding and transforming it. The role of art and creativity in shaping worldview. Art, as seen through his mother's influence, likely played a significant role in shaping Ricard's understanding of the world as well. Abstract art, in particular, is a medium that transcends logical structures and taps into deeper emotional and spiritual layers of human experience. In his mother's work, Ricard would have seen firsthand how creativity could be a form of inner exploration, much like meditation. This early exposure to art as a spiritual practice may have influenced his later belief that compassion and wisdom are not just intellectual concepts but qualities to be cultivated through direct experiential means. Moreover, art, like spirituality, often serves as a bridge between the personal and the universal. Abstract art, in particular, invites viewers to go beyond their habitual ways of seeing and to engage with the unknown, the ineffable. This resonates deeply with the Buddhist notion of emptiness, which refers to the idea that all phenomena are devoid of inherent, fixed existence. In this way, Ricard's exposure to his mother's abstract art may have subtly prepared him for the Buddhist teachings he would later embrace. The early seeds of compassion and ethical responsibility. Another important aspect of Ricard's early life was the ethical dimension instilled by both his parents. While his father's philosophical work often dealt with political and social issues, emphasizing the importance of freedom and human rights, his mother's spiritual sensibilities likely fostered a more personal, compassionate approach to ethics. Together, these influences helped cultivate a strong sense of ethical responsibility in Ricard, a quality that would later become central to his Buddhist practice and his advocacy for compassion in the modern world. Even as a child, Ricard was drawn to the idea of alleviating suffering, both his own and that of others. This concern for the well-being of others is a thread that runs throughout his life, from his early philosophical inquiries to his later work in promoting compassion meditation and ethical responsibility on a global scale. It is a testament to the deep moral foundation laid by his parents, both of whom, in their own ways, were committed to improving the human condition. A foundation for a remarkable life, Matthieu Ricard's early life was a remarkable confluence of intellectual rigor, artistic creativity, and spiritual sensitivity. The contrasting yet complementary influences of his father's philosophical mind and his mother's artistic soul provided him with a unique foundation, one that would enable him to bridge the worlds of science and spirituality in ways few others could. His early exposure to both the intellectual and the spiritual dimensions of life set the stage for his later journey into Tibetan Buddhism, where he would find a path that integrated these seemingly disparate realms into a cohesive whole. Ricard's upbringing also instilled in him a deep sense of ethical responsibility and compassion, qualities that would become central to his work as a Buddhist monk, meditation teacher, and global advocate for a more compassionate world. The seeds of his later achievements were sown in this early period, in the rich soil of philosophical debate, artistic exploration, and spiritual inquiry, a testament to the power of a childhood that nurtures both the mind and the heart. Academic career in molecular genetics. Matthieu Ricard's academic career in molecular genetics represents a critical phase in his life, one that bridged the rigorous analytical thinking instilled in him during his childhood with the scientific method. His early years in the world of molecular biology were marked by significant achievements, promising him a distinguished future in the field. However, despite his accomplishments, this period also ignited a deeper internal conflict, a sense that science, in its purest form, while powerful in its capacity to explain the mechanics of life, could not fully address the profound existential questions that had preoccupied him since his youth. This stage in Ricard's journey not only set the foundation for his later departure from the scientific world but also provided him with a unique skill set that he would eventually use to bridge the realms of science and spirituality. From philosophy to molecular genetics, the shift to science, Ricard's decision to pursue a career in molecular genetics was both natural and extraordinary, reflecting the intellectual environment in which he was raised. While philosophy and art shaped his early years, the scientific method offered a new and compelling way to explore the mysteries of life. The transition from philosophical questions to scientific inquiry marked a shift in Ricard's search for knowledge. Philosophy had given him a framework for critical thinking, but it was molecular genetics that provided the tools for empirical exploration, a method to test, quantify, and measure the physical world. Ricard enrolled at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, one of the world's most prestigious research centers for molecular biology. The Pasteur Institute had been at the forefront of groundbreaking discoveries in microbiology and immunology, and its rigorous academic environment was the ideal place for someone of Ricard's intellectual caliber. It was here that Ricard began to hone his skills as a scientist, delving into the inner workings of life at the molecular level, under the mentorship of François Jacob. A Nobel Prize-winning biologist, Ricard's early research focused on cellular processes, particularly the mechanisms that govern gene expression and regulation. Jacob, a towering figure in the world of molecular genetics, had been instrumental in the discovery of the operon model, a fundamental concept in genetics that explained how certain genes are turned on or off in response to environmental signals. Working alongside such a prominent figure provided Ricard with a world-class education in molecular biology, as well as exposure to some of the most cutting-edge research being conducted at the time. The Pasteur Institute, a hub of scientific excellence, the Pasteur Institute offered Ricard the chance to be part of a vibrant scientific community. Surrounded by brilliant minds, Ricard was immersed in an atmosphere of intense intellectual engagement. The researchers at the Pasteur Institute were not just studying the fundamentals of life, they were pushing the boundaries of what was known about genetics, microbiology, and cellular biology. Ricard thrived in this environment, contributing to research that sought to uncover the basic principles governing cellular function and the molecular mechanisms that underpin biological life. During his time at the Pasteur Institute, Ricard co-authored several papers that made important contributions to the understanding of gene regulation and cellular function. His research was highly technical, focusing on the complex interactions between DNA, RNA, and proteins, molecules that play crucial roles in the expression of genes and the functioning of cells. These studies provided valuable insights into how genes are regulated and expressed in response to various stimuli, laying the groundwork for future advances in genetics and molecular biology. Molecular genetics, understanding the mechanics of life. Molecular genetics, the field in which Ricard excelled, is the study of how genes are structured, function, and regulate biological processes at the molecular level. By focusing on the microscopic world of DNA and cellular machinery, molecular genetics seeks to explain the mechanisms that govern heredity, development, and cellular behavior. It was a rapidly evolving field in the 1960s and 1970s, spurred by the discovery of the double helix structure of DNA by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953. This discovery had opened up new possibilities for understanding the blueprint of life, and researchers like Ricard were at the forefront of exploring these possibilities. Ricard's work was particularly focused on the processes that regulate gene expression, how genes are turned on and off in response to different signals. This area of research is critical to understanding many biological phenomena, from the development of organisms to the cellular responses to environmental changes. Gene expression is controlled by a complex network of molecular interactions, and the ability to understand and manipulate these processes has vast implications for medicine, biotechnology, and agriculture. The study of gene regulation also has profound implications for understanding diseases, particularly cancer. Cancer is, in many ways, a disease of gene regulation, where normal processes that control cell growth and division go awry. By investigating the molecular mechanisms that regulate gene activity, researchers like Ricard were contributing to the broader effort to understand the causes of cancer and other genetic disorders. Early success and recognition in the scientific community. Ricard's work in molecular genetics was well received, and he quickly gained recognition as a rising star in the scientific community. His research was published in respected academic journals, and his contributions to the understanding of gene regulation were considered significant. Ricard was on a trajectory toward a highly successful career in science, and had he continued along this path, he likely would have become a leading figure in the field of molecular genetics. The scientific community valued Ricard's precision, his ability to think critically about complex biological problems, and his dedication to advancing knowledge in the field. His work was part of a broader effort to decode the molecular language of life, an endeavor that has since revolutionized fields like medicine, biotechnology, and genetics. Yet, despite his accomplishments, something was missing for Ricard. Even as he thrived in the intellectual rigor of molecular genetics, he felt a growing sense of dissatisfaction, a feeling that the kind of knowledge science offered was incomplete, disillusionment with the limitations of Western science. As Ricard delved deeper into the intricacies of molecular biology, he began to grapple with the limitations of science, particularly its inability to address the deeper existential questions that had long preoccupied him. While science could explain how genes worked, how cells communicated, and how organisms developed, it remained silent on questions of consciousness, the nature of the mind, and the meaning of existence. For Ricard, Western science, with all its power to describe the physical world, seemed inadequate when it came to exploring the internal dimensions of human experience. This realization led Ricard to a deep internal conflict. On one hand, he was passionate about science and the pursuit of empirical knowledge. On the other hand, he felt that science could not provide answers to the questions that mattered most to him, questions about suffering, happiness, consciousness, and the mind. Western science, for all its strengths, seemed limited to the material aspects of life. It could break down the components of living organisms, analyze their molecular interactions, and offer explanations for physical processes, but it could not touch the heart of human experience, the subjective world of thoughts, emotions, and consciousness. Ricard later described this period as one of profound existential unease. He saw the potential of science to do great good in the world, particularly in medicine and technology, but he also recognized its limitations. Science could explain the mechanics of life, but it could not explain life's meaning. This realization left Ricard searching for something more, something that could complement the knowledge science offered with a deeper, more holistic understanding of existence. The call toward a different path, the beginnings of spiritual exploration. It was during this period of intellectual and existential conflict that Ricard began exploring spiritual traditions, particularly Tibetan Buddhism. His growing interest in Buddhism was initially an intellectual pursuit, driven by his desire to find answers to the philosophical and existential questions that science could not address. However, as he delved deeper into Buddhist philosophy, Ricard discovered a system of thought and practice that not only addressed these questions but also provided a path to direct, experiential knowledge through meditation. Tibetan Buddhism, with its emphasis on the nature of the mind, consciousness, and the cultivation of compassion, offered Ricard something that Western science could not: a way to directly explore the inner dimensions of human experience. Buddhism, unlike the purely intellectual traditions Ricard had encountered, was a practical philosophy, one that emphasized meditation as a means of transforming the mind and gaining insight into the nature of reality. It was this emphasis on direct experience that captivated Ricard and eventually led him to leave behind his promising career in molecular genetics. In 1972, after earning his PhD in molecular genetics and completing several successful research projects, Ricard made the bold decision to leave the scientific world and dedicate himself fully to the study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism. This decision was not made lightly. It was the result of years of inner turmoil and philosophical exploration. Ricard's choice to become a monk was a testament to his deep desire to find answers to the existential questions that had long haunted him, questions that science, for all its brilliance, could not answer. The legacy of Ricard's scientific training. While Ricard's decision to leave molecular genetics marked a dramatic shift in his life, the skills and insights he gained from his scientific training would remain with him and shape his future endeavors. His background in molecular biology gave him a unique perspective on the intersection of science and spirituality, allowing him to engage with both worlds in a way few others could. Ricard's scientific training provided him with the intellectual discipline, critical thinking skills, and methodological rigor that would later inform his work on the neuroscience of meditation and compassion. Ricard's ability to navigate both the scientific and spiritual realms would become one of his defining characteristics. His unique background allowed him to collaborate with neuroscientists, psychologists, and other researchers interested in the effects of meditation on the brain, and his insights have contributed to a growing body of research on the benefits of mindfulness and compassion practices. In this way, Ricard's early career in molecular genetics, though seemingly unrelated to his later work as a Buddhist monk, played a crucial role in shaping his approach to life and his ability to bridge the gap between science and spirituality. A pivotal turning point, Matthieu Ricard's academic career in molecular genetics was marked by intellectual achievement and early success, but it also served as a turning point in his life. The rigorous demands of scientific inquiry gave him a solid foundation in critical thinking and empirical research, but it also exposed the limitations of Western science in addressing the deeper questions of human existence. This realization ultimately led Ricard to seek a new path, one that would allow him to explore the inner dimensions of the mind and consciousness. His decision to leave behind a promising scientific career and become a Tibetan Buddhist monk was a bold and unconventional choice, but one that would lead him to a life of deep spiritual fulfillment and global influence. Today, Ricard is celebrated not only for his contributions to science and meditation research but also for his ability to bridge two seemingly disparate worlds, science and spirituality, in a way that enriches both. His early experiences in molecular genetics continue to inform his work, demonstrating that the search for knowledge, whether scientific or spiritual, is ultimately a quest for understanding the deeper truths of existence. A radical shift, encounter with Tibetan Buddhism, the early 1970s marked a pivotal turning point in Matthieu Ricard's life. Despite his growing success in the field of molecular genetics, Ricard began to feel a profound dissatisfaction, a sense that something essential was missing from the purely scientific perspective he had been immersed in. The Western scientific paradigm, while adept at explaining the external workings of life, the mechanisms of DNA, genes, and cellular processes, could not address the deeper questions of human existence, suffering, and consciousness that had preoccupied him since his youth. This growing discontent led Ricard to search for answers beyond the laboratory. And it was in the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism that he found the philosophical and spiritual depth he was seeking. His encounter with Tibetan Buddhism would transform not only his personal life but also his understanding of the world, leading him to make one of the most radical shifts imaginable, leaving behind a promising scientific career to become a Buddhist monk. The early 1970s, the seeds of spiritual exploration. In the early 1970s, Ricard was introduced to the spiritual teachings of Tibetan Buddhism while visiting India. His initial encounters with this ancient tradition were marked by a deep sense of resonance. Unlike the Western philosophical and scientific traditions that were primarily intellectual in nature, Tibetan Buddhism offered both an intellectual framework and an experiential path. It provided not only a philosophical understanding of the mind and consciousness but also practical tools, namely meditation and ethical conduct, that allowed individuals to directly explore and transform their inner world. At the heart of Tibetan Buddhism was the idea that the nature of the mind could not be fully understood through intellectual analysis alone. It required direct experience. This approach stood in stark contrast to the scientific method Ricard had been trained in, where empirical data and objective measurements were the primary means of understanding the world. Tibetan Buddhism, on the other hand, emphasized that the mind itself could be explored through meditation, and that the direct experience of consciousness could lead to profound insights into the nature of reality. Ricard's initial interest in Tibetan Buddhism was primarily intellectual. He began reading Buddhist texts and engaging with the teachings on a philosophical level. However, as he delved deeper into the tradition, he realized that it was not enough to merely study these teachings, they needed to be practiced. Tibetan Buddhism placed a strong emphasis on the cultivation of wisdom and compassion through meditation and ethical living. For Ricard, this combination of intellectual rigor and practical application was precisely what he had been searching for, a path that could address the limitations he had encountered in Western science. Meeting the masters, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and other Tibetan teachers, one of the most transformative moments in Ricard's spiritual journey came when he met Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, a highly revered Tibetan Buddhist master. Khyentse Rinpoche, known for his profound wisdom, compassion, and mastery of meditation, would become Ricard's primary spiritual teacher and mentor. Meeting Khyentse Rinpoche was a life-changing experience for Ricard, one that would deepen his commitment to the Buddhist path and set the stage for his eventual ordination as a monk. Khyentse Rinpoche was not only a spiritual teacher but also a living example of the teachings he espoused. His presence, Ricard would later recall, radiated a deep sense of peace, compassion, and wisdom, qualities that Ricard had long sought but had not found in the intellectual or scientific worlds. Under Khyentse Rinpoche's guidance, Ricard began to immerse himself in the study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism, learning the intricacies of Buddhist philosophy, meditation techniques, and ethical conduct. Ricard's relationship with Khyentse Rinpoche went beyond that of a student and teacher. It was a profound spiritual bond, one that transcended the intellectual framework Ricard had grown up with. In the presence of Khyentse Rinpoche, Ricard experienced what he later described as a deep sense of inner peace and clarity, something that could not be explained by scientific or philosophical means alone. This experience convinced Ricard that the Buddhist path was not just a set of philosophical ideas but a living tradition that could transform the mind and heart. In addition to Khyentse Rinpoche, Ricard was also introduced to other renowned Tibetan Buddhist teachers, including the 16th Karmapa, the head of the Karma Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism, and Kanggyur Rinpoche, another highly respected meditation master. These encounters deepened Ricard's understanding of the Buddhist path and further reinforced his decision to dedicate his life to spiritual practice. The Tibetan masters embodied the qualities of wisdom, compassion, and ethical integrity that Ricard had long admired but had not found in the intellectual circles he had previously inhabited. The philosophical appeal of Tibetan Buddhism offered Ricard not only a spiritual path but also a sophisticated philosophical framework that addressed many of the existential questions he had grappled with throughout his life. Central to Tibetan Buddhist philosophy is the concept of emptiness, sunyata, which refers to the idea that all phenomena are devoid of inherent, independent existence. This idea resonated with Ricard's scientific understanding of the world, where everything is interconnected and constantly in flux. In Tibetan Buddhism, emptiness is not seen as a nihilistic concept but as a way to understand the fluid and interdependent nature of reality. Another core concept in Tibetan Buddhism is the nature of the mind itself. Unlike Western psychology, which often views the mind as a byproduct of brain activity, Tibetan Buddhism posits that the mind has a deeper, more fundamental nature, one that is luminous, aware, and capable of profound transformation. This view of the mind as something that can be cultivated and purified through meditation was particularly appealing to Ricard, as it offered a way to directly address the causes of suffering and unhappiness at their root. Tibetan Buddhism also places a strong emphasis on compassion as a central aspect of spiritual practice. The concept of bodhicitta, or the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, became a guiding principle in Ricard's spiritual journey. Compassion, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, is not just a passive feeling of empathy but an active, transformative force that motivates individuals to work for the well-being of others. This emphasis on compassion aligned with Ricard's long-standing desire to alleviate suffering, both in himself and in others. The decision to leave molecular genetics. As Ricard's involvement with Tibetan Buddhism deepened, he began to face a profound internal conflict. Should he continue his promising career in molecular genetics, or should he fully commit to the spiritual path? For several years, Ricard tried to balance his scientific work with his growing interest in Buddhism. But it became increasingly clear that he could not pursue both paths with the depth and dedication they required. In the early 1980s, Ricard made the momentous decision to leave behind his career in molecular genetics and fully dedicate himself to the Buddhist path. This decision was not easy. Ricard had spent years building his reputation as a scientist, and his research had the potential to lead to significant breakthroughs in molecular biology. Yet, despite the external success he had achieved, Ricard felt an inner calling that could not be ignored. He realized that the spiritual insights and practices he had encountered in Tibetan Buddhism offered a deeper, more meaningful way of understanding life than the scientific approach could provide. Ricard's decision to leave science behind was met with a range of reactions. Some of his colleagues in the scientific community were perplexed by his choice, unable to understand why someone with such a promising career would abandon it for a spiritual path. Others admired his courage and dedication, recognizing that Ricard was following a deeply personal calling that transcended conventional notions of success. For Ricard, the decision was not about rejecting science but about pursuing a more holistic understanding of the world, one that included both intellectual knowledge and direct, experiential insight. Ordination as a Tibetan Buddhist monk, in 1981, after years of study and practice. Ricard formally ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist monk under the guidance of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. This marked the culmination of his spiritual journey and his complete commitment to the Buddhist path. As a monk, Ricard adopted a life of simplicity, dedicating himself to meditation, study, and service. He took vows of celibacy, renunciation, and ethical conduct, fully embracing the monastic lifestyle that had been practiced by Tibetan monks for centuries. Ricard's ordination was not just a personal decision but also a profound spiritual transformation. By becoming a monk, Ricard was committing himself to a life of compassion, wisdom, and ethical integrity. The monastic path in Tibetan Buddhism is one of rigorous discipline, requiring years of study and meditation to cultivate the mind's potential for enlightenment. Ricard's decision to become a monk reflected his deep conviction that the Buddhist path offered the most effective way to understand the nature of the mind and alleviate suffering. As a monk, Ricard spent years in retreat, meditating for hours each day and studying the vast body of Tibetan Buddhist teachings. These retreats were not just periods of solitude but opportunities for deep inner transformation. In Tibetan Buddhism, meditation is seen as a way to directly experience the nature of the mind and reality, and Ricard's years in retreat allowed him to cultivate a deep sense of inner peace, compassion, and wisdom. The practice of meditation became the cornerstone of Ricard's spiritual life, offering him insights that would later inform his work as a teacher, author, and advocate for compassion. The role of meditation in Tibetan Buddhism. One of the key practices Ricard adopted as a Tibetan Buddhist monk was meditation. Tibetan Buddhism emphasizes the importance of meditation as a means of transforming the mind and cultivating qualities like compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness. Unlike many modern forms of meditation that focus primarily on relaxation or stress reduction, Tibetan Buddhist meditation is aimed at deep, long-term transformation of the mind. There are several forms of meditation practiced in Tibetan Buddhism, each with its own purpose and method. The first is shamatha, or calm abiding, which focuses on developing a stable and concentrated mind. This form of meditation involves focusing the attention on a single object, such as the breath, in order to calm the mind and cultivate mental clarity. Shamatha is considered the foundation for all other forms of meditation, as it helps the practitioner develop the mental stability necessary for deeper insights. The second form of meditation is vipassana, or insight meditation. This practice involves investigating the nature of reality, particularly the nature of the self and phenomena. In vipassana, practitioners are encouraged to examine their thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, recognizing their impermanent and interdependent nature. This practice is designed to lead to the realization of emptiness, the understanding that all phenomena are devoid of inherent existence. In addition to shamatha and vipassana, Tibetan Buddhism also places a strong emphasis on compassion meditation. Particularly the practice of Tonglen and metta, loving-kindness, meditation. In Tonglen, practitioners visualize taking on the suffering of others and sending them happiness and well-being in return. This practice is meant to cultivate an altruistic attitude and deepen one's capacity for empathy and compassion. Ricard's dedication to these forms of meditation transformed not only his personal experience but also his understanding of the mind. Through years of meditative practice, Ricard came to understand that the mind is not merely a passive recipient of experiences but an active participant in shaping reality. This insight, which aligns with Buddhist teachings on the nature of mind, would later inform his work with neuroscientists and his advocacy for compassion meditation in the modern world. A new identity. From scientist to monk, the radical shift from molecular geneticist to Tibetan Buddhist monk was not just a career change for Ricard, it was a complete transformation of his identity and worldview. In many ways, Ricard's journey from scientist to monk symbolized a broader shift in his understanding of knowledge and reality. Where science had once been the primary lens through which he viewed the world, spirituality now offered a more comprehensive and meaningful framework for understanding existence. For Ricard, the life of a monk was not about renouncing the world but about embracing a new way of being in the world, one that prioritized compassion, wisdom, and ethical responsibility over personal achievement or material success. The decision to become a monk was a reflection of Ricard's deep conviction that true happiness and fulfillment come not from external accomplishments but from inner transformation. Ricard's journey from scientist to monk was also a testament to his courage and willingness to follow his heart, even when it meant defying societal expectations. In leaving behind a promising scientific career, Ricard was taking a leap of faith, trusting that the Buddhist path would offer him the answers he had long sought. This leap would ultimately pay off, as Ricard's experiences as a monk not only transformed his personal life but also positioned him to make significant contributions to the global conversation on meditation. Compassion and ethical responsibility, a life transformed by Tibetan Buddhism. Matthieu Ricard's encounter with Tibetan Buddhism was a turning point that transformed every aspect of his life. What began as an intellectual exploration quickly deepened into a profound spiritual journey, one that led Ricard to leave behind a promising scientific career and dedicate himself to the Buddhist path. His decision to become a monk under the guidance of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one defined by meditation, compassion, and a commitment to alleviating the suffering of all beings. Ricard's embrace of Tibetan Buddhism was not a rejection of science but an expansion of his understanding of the world. By integrating the insights of Buddhist philosophy with the intellectual rigor of his scientific training, Ricard was able to bridge two seemingly disparate worlds, science and spirituality. This unique perspective would later inform his work as a meditation teacher, author, and advocate for compassion, allowing him to contribute to the growing dialogue between Eastern and Western approaches to the mind and consciousness. Through his radical shift from scientist to monk, Ricard exemplifies the possibility of personal transformation and the power of the spiritual path to provide answers to life's most profound questions. His journey is a testament to the idea that true wisdom comes not just from intellectual knowledge but from direct, experiential insight, an insight that Tibetan Buddhism has long offered to those willing to dedicate themselves to the path of meditation and compassion. Life in the Himalayas, a deep dive into Buddhist practice. Following Matthieu Ricard's decision to become a Tibetan Buddhist monk under the guidance of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, he entered a life that stood in stark contrast to his former existence as a scientist in the bustling world of Parisian laboratories. Ricard fully embraced the monastic life in the remote and rugged environment of the Himalayan mountains, dedicating himself to intensive meditation practice, study, and service. The shift was not just geographic but also deeply existential. Ricard's life in the Himalayas was one of radical simplicity, focused inward, yet with a profound sense of connection to the larger world through compassion. Living in the Himalayas afforded Ricard the ideal conditions for deep spiritual practice. The isolation and tranquility of the region, combined with the presence of some of the most revered Buddhist masters, made it a perfect setting for meditation and contemplation. The Himalayan mountains, with their vastness and serenity, have long been considered sacred in Tibetan Buddhism. They provide an environment conducive to both personal introspection and spiritual transformation. This chapter of Ricard's life, spent largely in remote retreats, was pivotal in his development as both a spiritual practitioner and a scholar of Buddhist philosophy. The role of meditation in Ricard's spiritual development. At the core of Ricard's life in the Himalayas was his meditation practice. Tibetan Buddhism places a strong emphasis on meditation as a means of transforming the mind and cultivating qualities such as compassion, wisdom, and mental clarity. For Ricard, meditation was not simply a tool for relaxation but a method for deep personal transformation. His daily practice, often carried out for hours at a time, was aimed at cultivating a profound understanding of the mind's nature and developing the mental discipline necessary for spiritual realization. There are two main types of meditation in Tibetan Buddhism that Ricard would have practiced: shamatha, calm abiding, and vipassana, insight meditation. Shamatha meditation is designed to stabilize the mind, allowing the practitioner to develop concentration and mental calmness. By focusing the attention on a single object, often the breath, practitioners learn to quiet the mind, reduce distractions, and cultivate a sense of inner stillness. Shamatha serves as the foundation for all other forms of meditation, as it provides the mental stability required for deeper insights. Vipassana, or insight meditation, is aimed at developing a deeper understanding of the nature of reality. In Tibetan Buddhism, this involves contemplating the impermanent, interconnected, and empty nature of all phenomena. Through Vipassana, practitioners come to realize that all things, including the self, are devoid of inherent, independent existence. This realization, known as the understanding of emptiness, sunyata, is a central tenet of Buddhist philosophy and is considered essential for attaining enlightenment. For Ricard, the practice of Vipassana allowed him to directly experience the teachings he had studied, leading to profound insights into the nature of the mind and reality. Ricard's meditation practice was not limited to the cushion, however. In Tibetan Buddhism, meditation extends beyond formal sessions and into every aspect of daily life. Mindfulness, or the practice of being fully present in each moment, is a key component of Tibetan Buddhist practice. Whether engaged in simple tasks like walking, eating, or cleaning, Ricard would have been trained to remain mindful, using these everyday activities as opportunities to cultivate awareness and compassion. Long-term retreats, the path of solitude and silence. A significant part of Ricard's life in the Himalayas was spent in long-term retreats, some lasting months or even years. These retreats, often held in remote and isolated hermitages, provided the ideal conditions for intensive meditation practice. Retreats in Tibetan Buddhism are considered crucial for achieving deep meditative states and realizing the profound truths of the Buddhist teachings. In these retreats, practitioners dedicate themselves to silent contemplation, study, and prayer, often with minimal contact with the outside world. Ricard's time in retreat allowed him to focus intensely on his meditation practice, free from the distractions and demands of everyday life. During these retreats, Ricard would have followed a strict schedule, meditating for hours each day, often in solitude. The purpose of such extended retreats is not only to deepen one's concentration and insight but also to purify the mind of negative emotions like anger, jealousy, and attachment. Tibetan Buddhist practice emphasizes the importance of transforming the mind at its deepest levels, and retreats are seen as essential for achieving this transformation. The silence and solitude of these retreats would have provided Ricard with the space to explore the inner workings of his mind and to cultivate the qualities of compassion and wisdom that are central to the Buddhist path. In the Tibetan tradition, long-term retreats are also considered a time for developing a direct experience of the teachings on emptiness and interdependence. Through sustained meditation, practitioners are able to access deeper levels of awareness and insight, ultimately leading to a transformation of their perception of reality. Ricard's retreats were not only periods of personal introspection but also opportunities for him to connect with the broader tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Retreats often involve the study of sacred texts and the practice of specific meditation techniques that have been passed down through centuries of Buddhist teachings. Ricard's time in retreat would have been guided by the instructions of his teachers, particularly Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who provided him with the spiritual guidance and support necessary for his meditative development. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, the influence of a master. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's influence on Ricard's life cannot be overstated. As Ricard's primary teacher and spiritual guide, Khyentse Rinpoche played a central role in shaping Ricard's understanding of Buddhist philosophy and practice. Khyentse Rinpoche was renowned not only for his deep wisdom and mastery of meditation but also for his immense compassion and humility. His teachings emphasized the importance of cultivating both intellectual understanding and direct experiential insight, a balance that would become a hallmark of Ricard's own approach to spirituality. Ricard's relationship with Khyentse Rinpoche was one of profound respect and devotion. Tibetan Buddhism places great importance on the relationship between teacher and student, particularly in the context of meditation and spiritual practice. The teacher, or Lama, is seen as the embodiment of the teachings and as a guide who helps the student navigate the complexities of the spiritual path. For Ricard, Khyentse Rinpoche was not only a source of wisdom but also a living example of the qualities he aspired to cultivate: compassion, equanimity, and profound insight into the nature of reality. Under Khyentse Rinpoche's guidance, Ricard was introduced to the deeper dimensions of Tibetan Buddhist practice, including the Tantric and Dzogchen traditions. Dzogchen, which means great perfection, is considered one of the most advanced teachings in Tibetan Buddhism. It focuses on realizing the intrinsic purity and natural perfection of the mind, beyond the dualistic distinctions of subject and object. Dzogchen teachings emphasize the direct experience of the mind's luminous, non-conceptual nature, a realization that is central to the path of enlightenment. Khyentse Rinpoche's teachings and presence had a transformative effect on Ricard. In the years following Khyentse Rinpoche's passing in 1991, Ricard would continue to draw on his teacher's wisdom and guidance, often reflecting on the profound impact Khyentse Rinpoche had on his life and practice. Ricard's deep sense of gratitude and devotion to his teacher is evident in his writings, where he often emphasizes the importance of the teacher-student relationship in the spiritual journey. The ethics of compassion and altruism, a central aspect of Ricard's Buddhist practice in the Himalayas, was the cultivation of compassion and altruism. Tibetan Buddhism places a strong emphasis on the development of bodhicitta, or the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Compassion, in this tradition, is not simply a passive feeling of empathy but an active, transformative force that motivates practitioners to work for the well-being of others. Ricard's meditation practice was deeply intertwined with the cultivation of compassion. In Tibetan Buddhism, specific meditation techniques, such as Tonglen, giving and taking, are used to develop compassion for others. Tonglen involves visualizing oneself taking on the suffering of others and sending them happiness and well-being in return. This practice is designed to break down the barriers of self-centeredness and cultivate a genuine sense of empathy and concern for the suffering of others. For Ricard, the practice of compassion was not just a spiritual exercise but a way of life. His years in the Himalayas were marked by a deep commitment to the well-being of others, both through his meditation practice and his everyday interactions. In addition to his personal practice, Ricard was involved in various humanitarian efforts, including supporting educational and medical projects in Tibet. These efforts were a reflection of his belief that spiritual practice must be grounded in ethical responsibility and a commitment to alleviating suffering in the world. The ethics of compassion that Ricard cultivated in the Himalayas would later become a central theme in his teachings and writings. As a Buddhist monk, Ricard has consistently emphasized the importance of altruism, not only as a personal practice but also as a fundamental principle for creating a more just and compassionate world. His time in the Himalayas provided him with a deep experiential foundation for these teachings, allowing him to speak with authenticity and authority on the transformative power of compassion. The integration of study and practice. Tibetan Buddhism places a strong emphasis on the integration of study and practice, and Ricard's life in the Himalayas was marked by a balance between these two aspects of the path. In addition to his intensive meditation practice, Ricard dedicated himself to the study of Buddhist philosophy, particularly the teachings on emptiness, interdependence, and the nature of mind. The study of sacred texts, commentaries, and the oral teachings of his masters provided Ricard with the intellectual foundation necessary for deepening his understanding of the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings. In the Tibetan tradition, study and practice are seen as complementary. Intellectual understanding alone is not sufficient for spiritual realization, it must be combined with direct experiential practice. Similarly, meditation without a solid foundation of philosophical understanding can lead to confusion or misinterpretation of the teachings. For Ricard, this integration of study and practice was essential to his spiritual development. His years of study under the guidance of Khyentse Rinpoche and other Tibetan masters provided him with the knowledge and context needed to fully engage with the meditative practices he was undertaking. The texts that Ricard studied during this time included the works of great Buddhist scholars such as Nagarjuna, Shantideva, and Longchenpa, as well as the foundational sutras and tantras of Tibetan Buddhism. These texts explore a wide range of topics, from the nature of reality and the mind to the ethical conduct necessary for the spiritual path. For Ricard, the study of these teachings was not merely an intellectual exercise but a means of deepening his meditation practice and understanding of the world. A life of simplicity and service. Life in the Himalayas was characterized by simplicity. As a monk, Ricard adopted a lifestyle that emphasized minimalism and renunciation. His daily life was centered around meditation, study, and service, with little concern for material comforts or worldly ambitions. This simplicity was not an end in itself but a means of creating the conditions necessary for spiritual practice. By reducing distractions and attachments, Ricard was able to focus his energy on the cultivation of compassion, wisdom, and mental clarity. Service to others was also a central aspect of Ricard's life in the Himalayas. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that the ultimate goal of spiritual practice is not personal enlightenment but the enlightenment of all beings. This altruistic motivation is embodied in the ideal of the Bodhisattva, a being who works tirelessly for the benefit of others. For Ricard, this meant not only cultivating compassion in his own heart but also engaging in practical efforts to help others. During his time in the Himalayas, Ricard was involved in various charitable projects, including the construction of schools, clinics, and monasteries in Tibet. These efforts were a reflection of his deep commitment to the well-being of others and his belief that spiritual practice must be grounded in ethical action. A life transformed by the Himalayas. Matthieu Ricard's life in the Himalayas was a period of deep spiritual transformation. Through years of intensive meditation, study, and service, Ricard cultivated the qualities of compassion, wisdom, and equanimity that have become the hallmarks of his teaching and writing. His time in retreat allowed him to directly experience the profound truths of the Buddhist teachings, and his relationship with his teacher, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, provided him with the spiritual guidance necessary for his journey. Ricard's years in the Himalayas were not just a personal retreat from the world but a time of preparation for the larger role he would later play as a bridge between the Eastern and Western worlds. The insights and experiences he gained during this period would inform his work as a meditation teacher, author, and advocate for compassion, allowing him to bring the ancient wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism to a global audience. In many ways, Ricard's life in the Himalayas represents the culmination of his spiritual quest, a quest that began in the intellectual circles of Paris and led him to the remote monasteries and hermitages of Tibet. The simplicity, discipline, and profound inner transformation that marked this period of his life are a testament to the power of the Buddhist path and the potential for human beings to cultivate compassion, wisdom, and peace in even the most challenging circumstances. Through his dedication to meditation and ethical conduct, Ricard has shown that true happiness and fulfillment come not from external achievements but from the cultivation of the heart and mind. Bridging science and spirituality, Matthieu Ricard's journey from molecular geneticist to Tibetan Buddhist monk uniquely positioned him to bridge two seemingly disparate worlds, the rigorous, empirical domain of science and the contemplative, experiential realm of spirituality. Having deeply immersed himself in both fields, Ricard became a key figure in the global dialogue between science and spirituality, advocating for a harmonious integration of the two in understanding the mind, consciousness, and human well-being. His life, particularly his collaborations with neuroscientists and his work on meditation and compassion, demonstrates that these realms, rather than being mutually exclusive, can complement each other in profound ways. While Ricard had physically distanced himself from the world of science when he moved to the Himalayas, he never abandoned his scientific mindset. His training in molecular genetics instilled in him a deep respect for empirical evidence and critical thinking, both of which he carried into his exploration of Tibetan Buddhist meditation. This dual perspective gave Ricard the ability to articulate the insights of Buddhist philosophy in a way that resonated with the scientific community, sparking a dialogue that would ultimately contribute to a deeper understanding of both fields, the neuroscience of meditation, collaborations with scientists. One of the most significant ways in which Ricard has bridged the gap between science and spirituality is through his collaboration with neuroscientists to study the effects of meditation on the brain. Ricard's expertise in Tibetan Buddhist meditation, combined with his scientific background, made him an ideal candidate for research into how meditation can alter brain function and promote mental well-being. In the early 2000s, Ricard began collaborating with Dr. Richard Davidson, a leading neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison who specializes in the neuroscience of emotion and well-being. Davidson, who had long been interested in the effects of meditation on the brain, saw in Ricard an opportunity to explore these effects at a deeper level. Ricard's decades of meditation practice made him an ideal subject for studying the long-term impact of meditation on brain function, particularly in relation to compassion and emotional regulation, using advanced brain imaging techniques such as functional MRI, fMRI, and electroencephalography, EEG. Davidson and his team measured Ricard's brain activity while he engaged in different forms of meditation, including focused attention and compassion meditation. The results were nothing short of remarkable. Ricard's brain exhibited unusually high levels of gamma waves, which are associated with attention, memory, learning, and even consciousness itself. These findings provided some of the first scientific evidence that long-term meditation can lead to significant changes in brain function, particularly in areas related to emotional regulation and cognitive control. Ricard's brain scans also showed heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex and insula, areas of the brain involved in empathy, emotional processing, and self-awareness. This was particularly evident during compassion meditation, where Ricard focused on generating feelings of compassion and altruism. The study demonstrated that meditation could effectively train the brain to become more compassionate, supporting the idea that empathy and kindness are not fixed traits but can be cultivated through sustained mental training. These groundbreaking studies were part of a growing body of research on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. The idea that the brain could change in response to experience had already gained traction in the scientific community, but Ricard's participation in these studies provided concrete evidence that meditation could be a powerful tool for promoting positive changes in brain structure and function. His involvement helped bring meditation research into the mainstream, inspiring further studies on how mindfulness and compassion practices can improve mental health and well-being, neuroplasticity, and the transformative power of meditation. One of the most profound findings from Ricard's collaboration with neuroscientists is the concept of neuroplasticity, specifically, the idea that meditation can lead to lasting changes in brain function. For decades, the prevailing view in neuroscience was that the adult brain was relatively fixed in its structure and that its capacity for change was limited. However, research on Ricard and other long-term meditators helped overturn this notion, demonstrating that the brain is far more malleable than previously thought. The studies conducted on Ricard's brain revealed that long-term meditation can increase activity in areas associated with positive emotions, empathy, and emotional resilience. This finding has profound implications for mental health. If the brain can be trained to become more compassionate, empathetic, and emotionally stable through meditation, then practices like mindfulness and compassion meditation could be used to treat and prevent mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Neuroplasticity also suggests that even relatively short-term meditation practice can have measurable effects on brain function. Studies involving novice meditators have shown that just a few weeks of consistent meditation practice can increase gray matter density in the hippocampus, an area of the brain involved in learning and memory, and decrease activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. These findings suggest that meditation can help individuals regulate their emotions, reduce stress, and improve cognitive function, even in the absence of years of intensive practice. For Ricard, these discoveries confirmed what Tibetan Buddhist practitioners had known for centuries, that the mind, and by extension the brain, is not a static entity but can be transformed through sustained mental training. The implications of this research go far beyond personal well-being, offering a glimpse into how meditation could be integrated into healthcare, education, and even public policy to promote greater mental health and social harmony. Compassion meditation, cultivating altruism through the brain, a central focus of Ricard's collaboration with neuroscientists has been the study of compassion meditation and its effects on both the brain and behavior. In Tibetan Buddhism, compassion is not just a moral ideal but a skill that can be cultivated through meditation. The practice of compassion meditation involves generating a deep sense of empathy and concern for the suffering of others, with the aspiration to alleviate that suffering. The research conducted on Ricard's brain during compassion meditation provided some of the strongest evidence to date that meditation can enhance the brain's capacity for empathy and altruism. As mentioned earlier, Ricard's brain showed increased activity in the insula and the prefrontal cortex, regions associated with emotional awareness, empathy, and pro-social behavior, during compassion meditation. This suggested that meditation could not only increase one's capacity for compassion but also lead to real-world changes in behavior. Indeed, studies on compassion meditation have shown that participants who engage in this practice are more likely to engage in altruistic behavior, such as helping others or donating to charity, even when doing so requires personal sacrifice. This finding has significant implications for both individual and societal well-being. If compassion can be cultivated through meditation, then it may be possible to create more compassionate communities and institutions, where individuals are motivated by empathy and concern for others rather than self-interest. Ricard's advocacy for compassion meditation extends beyond the laboratory. He has long argued that compassion should be a central value in both individual and collective life, and that it holds the key to addressing many of the world's most pressing problems, from social inequality to environmental degradation. His work, both as a scientist and a monk, demonstrates that compassion is not just a personal virtue but a fundamental aspect of human flourishing that can be cultivated through mental training, the mind-body connection, integrating Eastern and Western perspectives. Ricard's unique background as both a scientist and a monk has enabled him to contribute to a growing dialogue on the mind-body connection, particularly in the context of mental health and well-being. While Western medicine has traditionally focused on the treatment of physical ailments, there is increasing recognition that mental and emotional health are just as important for overall well-being. This shift in perspective has been influenced in part by research on mindfulness and meditation, which has shown that these practices can have a profound impact on both mental and physical health. In Tibetan Buddhism, the mind and body are seen as deeply interconnected, with mental states having a direct influence on physical health and vice versa. Meditation is considered a way to bring the mind and body into harmony, promoting both mental clarity and physical well-being. This holistic view of health is increasingly being validated by scientific research, which has shown that meditation can reduce stress, lower blood pressure, improve immune function, and even slow the aging process. Ricard's work in this area highlights the potential for a more integrated approach to healthcare, one that recognizes the importance of mental and emotional well-being in promoting overall health. By bridging the gap between science and spirituality, Ricard has helped to pave the way for a more holistic understanding of health, where practices like meditation are seen not as alternative or complementary therapies but as essential components of a comprehensive healthcare strategy. The ethics of science, compassion and altruism in research. In addition to his work on the neuroscience of meditation, Ricard has also been an advocate for the ethical dimensions of scientific research. He has argued that science, like any other human endeavor, should be guided by ethical principles, particularly the principle of compassion. For Ricard, the ultimate goal of scientific research should not be the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake but the alleviation of suffering and the promotion of well-being. Ricard's emphasis on compassion in science is rooted in his Buddhist training, which teaches that all actions should be motivated by the desire to benefit others. This principle, known as bodhicitta, or the altruistic aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, has been central to Ricard's life and work. He believes that the same principle should apply to scientific research, that science should be conducted with the goal of improving the human condition and addressing the root causes of suffering. Ricard has called for greater collaboration between scientists and spiritual practitioners, arguing that the insights of both fields can be combined to address global challenges such as climate change, social inequality, and mental health. He has also advocated for a more compassionate approach to animal research, emphasizing the need to minimize harm and suffering in scientific experiments. For Ricard, the integration of compassion into science is not just a moral imperative but a practical necessity. He believes that without a compassionate framework, scientific advancements could be misused, leading to greater harm rather than benefit. By promoting a more ethical approach to science, Ricard hopes to ensure that scientific research serves the common good and contributes to a more just and compassionate world. a new paradigm for understanding the mind. Matthieu Ricard's work in bridging science and spirituality has opened up new possibilities for understanding the mind, consciousness, and human well-being. Through his collaborations with neuroscientists, his advocacy for compassion meditation, and his emphasis on the ethical dimensions of science, Ricard has demonstrated that the insights of both science and spirituality can be combined to create a more holistic and compassionate understanding of the human experience. Ricard's unique perspective, informed by his background as both a molecular geneticist and a Tibetan Buddhist monk, has helped to break down the traditional barriers between science and spirituality. His work shows that these two domains, far from being incompatible, can enrich and complement each other, offering new insights into the nature of the mind and the potential for human transformation. In a world increasingly dominated by technology and materialism, Ricard's message is one of hope and possibility. He reminds us that the mind is not fixed or limited, but capable of profound transformation through sustained mental training. By cultivating qualities such as compassion, mindfulness, and emotional resilience, we can not only improve our own well-being but also contribute to the well-being of others and the creation of a more compassionate world. Ricard's work is a testament to the power of the mind and the potential for human beings to transcend the limitations of both science and spirituality by integrating the insights of both. His life and work offer a vision of a future where science and spirituality are no longer seen as opposing forces but as complementary paths toward understanding the mysteries of consciousness and the true nature of human existence. Neuroplasticity in meditation, the power of the brain to change, one of the most groundbreaking revelations to emerge from Matthieu Ricard's collaboration with neuroscientists is the profound insight into neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to change, adapt, and reorganize itself throughout life. This idea, once considered radical, has now become a cornerstone of modern neuroscience, transforming how we understand not only learning and memory but also mental health, emotional regulation, and personal development. Neuroplasticity challenges the long-held notion that the adult brain is relatively fixed and unchangeable, suggesting instead that our experiences, thoughts, and behaviors can continuously shape the structure and function of our brains. For Ricard, neuroplasticity is not merely an interesting scientific discovery but a concept that aligns closely with Buddhist teachings on the mind's capacity for transformation. Tibetan Buddhism, particularly in its meditative practices, has long held that the mind is malleable and can be trained to cultivate positive qualities like compassion, mindfulness, and emotional resilience. The scientific validation of neuroplasticity through meditation research provides empirical support for these ancient practices, offering a bridge between the contemplative traditions of the East and the empirical rigor of Western science. The discovery of neuroplasticity, overturning old paradigms. For much of the 20th century, the prevailing view in neuroscience was that the brain's development was largely complete by early adulthood. It was believed that after this point, the brain's ability to change was limited and that its neural architecture was mostly fixed. This perspective shaped much of the thinking around education, mental health, and rehabilitation, leading to the assumption that cognitive and emotional abilities were difficult, if not impossible, to alter in significant ways later in life. However, research in the latter half of the 20th century began to challenge this view. Studies on stroke patients, for example, revealed that damaged areas of the brain could sometimes be compensated for by other regions, suggesting that the brain was more adaptable than previously thought. Similarly, experiments on animals demonstrated that enriched environments could lead to increased neural growth, even in adult brains. The discovery of neuroplasticity revolutionized our understanding of the brain, revealing that it is, in fact, highly dynamic and capable of change throughout life. This newfound understanding opened the door to exploring how various experiences, including meditation, could shape the brain in positive ways. Ricard's involvement in this research brought the question of meditation's impact on neuroplasticity to the forefront. Highlighting the potential for mental training to bring about lasting, beneficial changes in brain function, The Science of Meditation and Neuroplasticity. Meditation, particularly long-term practice as cultivated by Ricard and other Buddhist monks, offers a powerful example of how intentional mental training can shape the brain. Studies involving Ricard, as well as other experienced meditators, have shown that regular meditation practice can lead to structural and functional changes in the brain, evidence that supports the notion of neuroplasticity in action. Functional MRI, fMRI, and electroencephalography, EEG, studies have revealed significant alterations in brain activity during meditation, particularly in areas associated with attention, emotional regulation, empathy, and compassion. For example, researchers have observed increased activation in the prefrontal cortex, a region involved in executive functions like decision-making, self-regulation, and emotional control. This suggests that meditation strengthens the brain's capacity to manage emotions and make thoughtful, deliberate decisions. Additionally, Ricard's brain scans during meditation showed heightened activity in regions like the insula, which plays a key role in empathy and emotional awareness, and the amygdala, the brain's center for processing fear and stress. Regular meditation practice has been found to reduce activity in the amygdala, which translates to a reduction in the brain's automatic stress and fear responses. Over time, this can lead to improved emotional resilience and a greater ability to cope with life's challenges. One of the most notable findings from these studies is the increase in gamma wave activity observed in Ricard's brain. Gamma waves are associated with higher cognitive functions such as attention, memory, and perception. The unusually high levels of gamma waves observed during Ricard's compassion meditation suggest that long-term meditation can enhance cognitive abilities and emotional well-being. This heightened gamma activity persisted even after the meditation session had ended, indicating that the effects of meditation may extend beyond the immediate practice, leading to lasting changes in brain function. Structural changes. Meditation's impact on brain anatomy. In addition to functional changes, meditation has been shown to produce structural changes in the brain, reinforcing the idea that neuroplasticity is not limited to short-term fluctuations in brain activity but can lead to more permanent alterations in brain anatomy. Studies using MRI technology have demonstrated that experienced meditators like Ricard tend to have thicker cortical areas in regions related to attention, sensory processing, and emotional regulation. This increase in cortical thickness is thought to reflect the brain's enhanced ability to process information and regulate emotions as a result of sustained meditation practice. One of the most well-known studies in this area was conducted by Harvard neuroscientist Sarah Lazar, who found that regular meditation practice was associated with increased gray matter density in the hippocampus, a region involved in learning, memory, and emotional regulation. At the same time, the amygdala, which is responsible for the brain's stress response, showed decreased gray matter density in meditators, suggesting that meditation can physically alter the brain's emotional circuitry. These findings have important implications for mental health. By strengthening the areas of the brain associated with positive emotional states and reducing the activity of regions linked to stress and fear, meditation may offer a powerful tool for improving emotional well-being and resilience. This neuroplasticity-driven transformation of the brain aligns with Buddhist teachings, which emphasize the mind's capacity for cultivating positive qualities through consistent practice, short-term meditation practice, and brain plasticity. One of the most exciting aspects of neuroplasticity is that it is not limited to long-term meditators like Ricard. While the effects of meditation may be more pronounced in those who have practiced for many years, research has shown that even short-term meditation practice can lead to measurable changes in the brain, in a groundbreaking study by Lazar and her colleagues. Participants who engaged in an 8-week mindfulness meditation program showed significant increases in gray matter density in the hippocampus and reductions in gray matter density in the amygdala. These changes were correlated with reductions in stress and improvements in emotional regulation, suggesting that even brief periods of meditation can have a tangible impact on brain structure and function. For individuals who are new to meditation, these findings offer a hopeful message. The brain's capacity for change is not limited to advanced practitioners. Neuroplasticity ensures that anyone, regardless of age or experience, can benefit from the mental training provided by meditation. This has profound implications for fields such as mental health, education, and rehabilitation, where meditation could be used as a tool to promote emotional well-being, enhance cognitive function, and improve overall quality of life. Implications for mental health and well-being. The discovery of neuroplasticity, combined with research on meditation's impact on the brain, offers a new paradigm for understanding mental health and well-being. Rather than viewing mental health conditions as fixed or immutable, neuroplasticity suggests that the brain's emotional and cognitive circuits can be reshaped through intentional practice. This opens the door to new approaches for treating and preventing conditions such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Meditation, particularly mindfulness and compassion-based practices, has been shown to reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety by helping individuals develop greater emotional awareness and resilience. By training the brain to regulate its stress responses and focus on the present moment, meditation can help individuals break the cycle of rumination and negative thought patterns that often accompany these conditions. Compassion meditation, in particular, has shown promise in improving mental health by fostering a sense of connection and empathy. Ricard's brain studies have provided evidence that compassion meditation can increase activity in brain areas related to empathy and reduce feelings of social isolation. This is particularly important in today's world, where loneliness and social disconnection have become widespread public health concerns. Neuroplasticity also offers hope for individuals suffering from trauma. Research on mindfulness-based therapies has shown that meditation can help individuals with PTSD by reducing hyperactivity in the amygdala and increasing activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for emotional regulation and decision-making. By calming the brain's fear response and enhancing its ability to process emotions, meditation can help individuals recover from trauma and build emotional resilience. Meditation as mental training, a new frontier for education and personal development. The concept of neuroplasticity, coupled with the growing body of research on meditation, suggests that mental training through meditation could be integrated into mainstream education and personal development. Just as physical exercise is recognized as essential for maintaining physical health, meditation could be seen as a form of mental exercise that promotes cognitive, emotional, and psychological well-being. Schools and universities are increasingly incorporating mindfulness programs into their curricula, recognizing the benefits of meditation for students' focus, emotional regulation, and academic performance. By teaching students to cultivate mindfulness and compassion from an early age, educators can help foster a generation that is not only more emotionally resilient but also more empathetic and socially connected. Similarly, meditation can be integrated into personal and professional development programs to help individuals enhance their cognitive abilities, reduce stress, and build emotional intelligence. Corporate mindfulness programs, for example, have been shown to reduce burnout, improve focus, and enhance interpersonal relationships in the workplace. These programs reflect the growing recognition that meditation is not just a personal practice but a powerful tool for improving both individual and collective well-being. Neuroplasticity and the future of human potential. The research on neuroplasticity in meditation, much of it informed by Ricard's work with neuroscientists, has profound implications for how we understand the mind, the brain, and human potential. Neuroplasticity offers a hopeful message, no matter where we start. The brain is capable of change, and through intentional mental training, we can cultivate positive qualities such as compassion, mindfulness, and emotional resilience. For Ricard, this scientific validation of neuroplasticity aligns with Buddhist teachings on the mind's potential for transformation. Tibetan Buddhism has long taught that the mind is malleable and can be shaped through meditation and ethical practice. The discoveries of modern neuroscience confirm that the brain, like the mind, is not static but capable of growth and change. As more research is conducted on the effects of meditation and neuroplasticity, we may begin to see meditation integrated into healthcare, education, and personal development on a larger scale. The potential for meditation to improve mental health, enhance cognitive function, and foster emotional resilience could revolutionize how we approach human well-being, offering a new path for individuals and society to cultivate the best aspects of our nature. The power of the brain to change is a testament to the incredible potential within each of us to grow, transform, and contribute to a more compassionate and mindful world. Through the lens of neuroplasticity, Ricard's life and work serve as an inspiring example of how meditation can unlock the mind's potential and lead to greater wisdom, compassion, and fulfillment. Compassion meditation, practical implications for individuals and society. Compassion meditation, one of the core practices in Tibetan Buddhism, holds immense potential for transforming not just individuals but also society at large. Matthieu Ricard's life and work provide a profound example of how this practice can cultivate empathy, altruism, and emotional resilience, qualities essential for personal well-being and social harmony. Compassion meditation, or karabhavana, involves training the mind to develop a deep sense of empathy and concern for the suffering of others, with the goal of actively working to alleviate that suffering, through his collaboration with neuroscientists. Ricard has contributed to a growing body of evidence demonstrating that compassion meditation can reshape the brain in ways that foster kindness, generosity, and emotional well-being. Beyond the personal benefits, Ricard's advocacy for compassion meditation extends to its broader social implications, how cultivating compassion can improve relationships, reduce conflict, and address systemic issues such as inequality, discrimination, and even environmental degradation. In this section, we will explore the practical implications of compassion meditation for individuals and society, focusing on its impact on mental health, interpersonal relationships, ethical behavior, and global challenges. Cultivating emotional resilience and mental well-being. One of the most immediate benefits of compassion meditation is its impact on emotional resilience and mental well-being. Studies on long-term practitioners like Ricard, as well as novice meditators, have shown that compassion meditation can lead to significant improvements in emotional regulation, stress reduction, and overall mental health. This is particularly important in today's world, where mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and chronic stress have become increasingly prevalent. Compassion meditation helps individuals develop greater emotional awareness and empathy, allowing them to navigate difficult emotions with greater ease. By focusing on the suffering of others and generating feelings of compassion, practitioners are able to step outside their own emotional turmoil and adopt a more expansive, altruistic mindset. This shift in perspective can reduce the tendency toward self-centeredness, which often exacerbates negative emotional states like anxiety and depression. Neuroscientific research supports these findings, demonstrating that compassion meditation can reduce activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear and stress center, and increase activity in areas associated with empathy and emotional regulation, such as the prefrontal cortex and insula. These changes in brain function suggest that compassion meditation not only helps individuals manage stress but also enhances their capacity to respond to challenging situations with equanimity and kindness. For individuals struggling with mental health issues, compassion meditation offers a powerful tool for building emotional resilience. By training the mind to focus on the well-being of others, practitioners can develop a more balanced and compassionate relationship with their own emotions, reducing the impact of negative mental states and fostering a greater sense of inner peace, strengthening interpersonal relationships and social connection. At the interpersonal level, compassion meditation can profoundly impact how individuals relate to one another. By cultivating empathy and concern for the suffering of others, compassion meditation enhances social bonds and improves the quality of relationships. Research has shown that individuals who engage in compassion meditation are more likely to engage in pro-social behavior, such as helping others, offering support, and showing kindness, even when doing so requires personal sacrifice. One of the key benefits of compassion meditation is its ability to reduce feelings of anger, resentment, and hostility, emotions that often arise in the context of interpersonal conflict. By training the mind to focus on the suffering of others and generate feelings of compassion, practitioners are able to shift their focus away from their own grievances and adopt a more empathetic and understanding attitude. This can help de-escalate conflicts and promote reconciliation. Making compassion meditation a valuable tool for improving communication and fostering harmony in relationships. In addition to reducing conflict, compassion meditation can also enhance positive emotional experiences in relationships, such as love, gratitude, and appreciation. By cultivating a mindset of altruism and empathy, individuals become more attuned to the needs and well-being of others, deepening their emotional connections and fostering a sense of mutual support. This has implications not only for personal relationships but also for community and workplace dynamics, where compassion and cooperation can lead to more productive and harmonious interactions. Ricard himself has often spoken about the importance of compassion in interpersonal relationships, emphasizing that kindness and empathy are the foundation of strong and meaningful connections. His advocacy for compassion meditation reflects his belief that by cultivating these qualities, individuals can create more loving, supportive, and fulfilling relationships, both at home and in the broader social context. Fostering ethical behavior and altruism, compassion meditation goes beyond personal well-being and interpersonal relationships. It also has profound ethical implications. By training the mind to cultivate empathy and concern for others, compassion meditation naturally leads to more ethical behavior. Practitioners of compassion meditation are more likely to act in ways that promote the well-being of others. Whether through acts of kindness, generosity, or ethical decision-making, in the Buddhist tradition, compassion is considered one of the highest virtues, and it is closely linked to the ethical principle of ahimsa, or non-harming. Compassion meditation helps individuals internalize this ethical principle by fostering a deep sense of interconnectedness with all living beings. When we recognize the suffering of others as our own, we are naturally inclined to act in ways that reduce harm and promote well-being. Research supports this idea, showing that individuals who engage in compassion meditation are more likely to engage in altruistic behavior, such as donating to charity, volunteering, or helping others in need. In one study, participants who practiced compassion meditation were more likely to give money to strangers in need, even at a personal cost, compared to those who did not practice compassion meditation. This suggests that compassion meditation not only increases empathy but also translates into concrete actions that benefit others. Ricard's own life is a testament to the ethical and altruistic dimensions of compassion meditation. In addition to his role as a meditation teacher and advocate for compassion, Ricard has been deeply involved in humanitarian work, particularly in the areas of education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability. His efforts to improve the lives of others reflect the ethical commitment that lies at the heart of compassion meditation, the aspiration to alleviate suffering and promote the welfare of all beings. Compassion in education. Creating a more empathetic generation. The implications of compassion meditation extend beyond individuals to institutions, particularly in the field of education. As awareness of the benefits of mindfulness and compassion meditation grows, more schools and educational institutions are incorporating these practices into their curricula to promote the emotional and social development of students. Teaching compassion meditation to children and young adults can help foster emotional intelligence, empathy, and social responsibility from an early age. By learning to cultivate compassion, students can develop a greater understanding of their own emotions and the emotions of others, which can improve their ability to navigate social interactions and reduce bullying, aggression, and social isolation. Moreover, the practice of compassion meditation can help students manage stress, enhance focus, and improve academic performance by promoting emotional regulation and mental clarity. Programs that integrate mindfulness and compassion practices into education have shown promising results. For example, studies have found that students who engage in mindfulness and compassion training experience reductions in anxiety, depression, and aggression, as well as improvements in emotional regulation and social skills. These benefits not only enhance individual well-being but also contribute to a more positive and supportive school environment, where students are encouraged to act with kindness and empathy toward their peers. By incorporating compassion meditation into educational programs, schools can play a critical role in creating a more empathetic and compassionate generation, one that is equipped to address the complex social and ethical challenges of the future. Ricard has been a strong advocate for the inclusion of compassion and mindfulness in education, believing that these practices can help cultivate the qualities necessary for a more just and compassionate society. Addressing global challenges, compassion as a solution to systemic issues, beyond its personal and interpersonal benefits, compassion meditation has the potential to address systemic global challenges, from social inequality to environmental degradation. Ricard has long argued that many of the world's most pressing problems, war, poverty, discrimination, and ecological destruction, are rooted in a lack of compassion and empathy. He believes that by cultivating compassion on a global scale, we can begin to address the underlying causes of these issues and work toward more just and sustainable solutions. One of the key challenges facing the world today is social inequality, which manifests in disparities in income, education, healthcare, and opportunities. Compassion meditation, by fostering a sense of interconnectedness and empathy, can help reduce the sense of division and otherness that often underpins social inequality. When individuals and societies recognize the shared humanity of all people, regardless of their socio-economic status, they are more likely to support policies and initiatives that promote equality and justice. Environmental degradation is another area where compassion meditation can play a transformative role. Ricard has been a vocal advocate for environmental sustainability, arguing that compassion for all living beings, including animals and the natural world, is essential for addressing the ecological crises we face. Compassion meditation helps individuals develop a deeper sense of responsibility for the planet and a willingness to take action to protect the environment. By fostering an ethical mindset that values all forms of life, compassion meditation can inspire more sustainable and environmentally conscious behaviors. Ricard's work in promoting compassion meditation as a solution to global challenges reflects his belief that compassion is not just a personal virtue but a collective responsibility. He argues that by cultivating compassion on a societal level, we can create a world that is more just, peaceful, and sustainable, one where individuals and communities work together to alleviate suffering and promote the well-being of all beings. The role of compassion in public policy and governance. Compassion meditation also has significant implications for public policy and governance. Ricard has argued that compassion should be a guiding principle in the development of public policies, particularly those related to healthcare, education, social welfare, and environmental protection. By integrating compassion into the policy-making process, governments can create policies that prioritize the well-being of individuals and communities, rather than focusing solely on economic growth or political power. For example, policies that promote access to healthcare, education, and social services can be seen as expressions of compassion, as they are designed to reduce suffering and improve quality of life. Similarly, environmental policies that protect ecosystems and mitigate climate change are rooted in compassion for future generations and for the planet itself. Ricard believes that by incorporating compassion into governance, leaders can create a more ethical and just society, one that values the well-being of all people and the environment over short-term interests. His advocacy for compassion in public policy reflects a broader vision of governance that is rooted in empathy, ethical responsibility, and a commitment to the common good. Compassion meditation as a catalyst for global change. Matthieu Ricard's work on compassion meditation demonstrates the transformative potential of this practice for individuals, communities, and society as a whole. By cultivating empathy, altruism, and emotional resilience, compassion meditation not only improves personal well-being but also strengthens interpersonal relationships, fosters ethical behavior, and addresses systemic global challenges. The practical implications of compassion meditation are vast, from promoting mental health and emotional intelligence to creating more just and compassionate institutions. As Ricard has shown, compassion is not just a personal practice but a powerful tool for social change, one that can help address some of the most pressing issues of our time, from inequality and discrimination to environmental destruction and global conflict. Compassion meditation offers a vision of a more compassionate world, one where individuals and societies work together to alleviate suffering, promote well-being, and create a more just and sustainable future. Through his teachings, writings, and humanitarian efforts, Ricard has inspired millions to embrace the practice of compassion meditation and to recognize its potential to transform both the inner world of the mind and the outer world of human society. Ethical implications of Ricard's work. Compassion and altruism. Matthieu Ricard's life and work exemplify a profound commitment to the ethical values of compassion and altruism, deeply rooted in his Buddhist practice and informed by his scientific understanding of human behavior. Ricard's philosophy is centered around the idea that true happiness and fulfillment arise not from self-centered pursuits but from living in service to others. His advocacy for compassion and altruism extends far beyond the personal sphere, encompassing a broad ethical vision for society, one where collective well-being is prioritized over individual gain, and where ethical responsibility is embraced by individuals, communities, and institutions alike. The ethical implications of Ricard's work are far-reaching, touching on issues as diverse as social justice, environmental sustainability, and the role of science in society. At the core of his message is the belief that cultivating compassion and altruism is not only a moral imperative but also essential for the survival and flourishing of humanity in an increasingly interconnected and interdependent world. Ricard's work challenges conventional notions of success, materialism, and individualism, offering instead a vision of ethical living that is grounded in empathy, responsibility, and a commitment to the well-being of all sentient beings. The ethics of altruism. Beyond self-interest. In his writings and teachings, Ricard frequently contrasts two fundamentally different approaches to life, one based on self-interest and competition, and the other based on altruism and compassion. He argues that while modern society often encourages individuals to pursue personal success, wealth, and status, this approach ultimately leads to dissatisfaction, disconnection, and unhappiness. By contrast, a life rooted in altruism, where one's actions are motivated by a genuine concern for the well-being of others, leads to deeper, more lasting fulfillment. Ricard's concept of altruism is not simply about occasional acts of kindness but about cultivating a fundamental attitude of selflessness and care for others in every aspect of life. He advocates for an expanded view of altruism that goes beyond the traditional distinction between self-interest and the interests of others, emphasizing the interconnectedness of all beings. In this view, acting altruistically is not just about benefiting others at the expense of oneself, it is also a means of enhancing one's own well-being, as compassion and altruism are deeply rewarding emotional states. Scientific research supports this idea, showing that acts of kindness and generosity activate areas of the brain associated with pleasure and reward, leading to what has been called the helper's high. Studies have also demonstrated that individuals who regularly engage in altruistic behavior tend to have lower levels of stress, greater emotional well-being, and longer life expectancy. Ricard's advocacy for altruism is therefore not only an ethical stance but also a practical one, grounded in the recognition that caring for others is integral to our own happiness and mental health. Compassion as an ethical imperative. Central to Ricard's ethical vision is the concept of compassion, which he views as the foundation of all moral behavior. In Buddhist philosophy, compassion is defined as the sincere wish to alleviate the suffering of others, combined with the willingness to take action to do so. For Ricard, compassion is not just an emotion but a moral responsibility, one that extends to all sentient beings. Regardless of their species, nationality, or social status, Ricard argues that in a world marked by inequality, violence, and environmental destruction, the cultivation of compassion is more important than ever. He believes that many of the global challenges we face today, such as poverty, war, and climate change, are rooted in a lack of compassion and empathy. Without compassion, individuals and societies are prone to act in ways that prioritize short-term self-interest over the long-term well-being of others, leading to harm and suffering on a massive scale. The ethical imperative of compassion, as articulated by Ricard, calls for a radical rethinking of how we approach issues of social justice and environmental sustainability. It requires us to recognize the interconnectedness of all life and to adopt a more expansive moral perspective, one that takes into account not only the interests of present generations but also the well-being of future generations and the planet itself. Compassion and social justice. Addressing inequality and suffering, Ricard's work highlights the ethical implications of compassion for social justice. He argues that a compassionate society is one that actively works to reduce inequality and alleviate the suffering of marginalized and vulnerable populations. This includes addressing systemic issues such as poverty, discrimination, and access to healthcare and education, all of which are deeply interconnected with the well-being of individuals and communities. Compassion, in Ricard's view, must be the driving force behind efforts to create a more just and equitable society. He believes that policies and institutions should be designed with the goal of reducing suffering and promoting the well-being of all people, particularly those who are most vulnerable. This includes advocating for economic systems that prioritize fairness and the equitable distribution of resources, as well as social policies that provide support for those in need. Ricard's commitment to social justice is reflected in his humanitarian work, particularly his involvement in projects that aim to improve education and healthcare in Tibet and other regions. Through the Karunashichen organization, which he co-founded, Ricard has worked to provide essential services to underserved communities, focusing on empowering individuals through education and access to healthcare. These efforts are an embodiment of Ricard's belief that compassion must be put into action through concrete efforts to alleviate suffering and promote human dignity. In advocating for social justice, Ricard emphasizes that compassion is not merely a feeling but a moral obligation to act. He believes that individuals and societies have a responsibility to address the root causes of suffering and to create systems that promote the well-being of all, rather than privileging the few at the expense of the many. This ethical stance challenges the dominant values of individualism and competition that often drive social and economic policies. Offering instead a vision of a more compassionate and inclusive world, the ethical responsibility of science, compassionate research and innovation. Another important aspect of Ricard's ethical philosophy is his view of the role of science and technology in society. While Ricard is a strong advocate for scientific research, particularly in the fields of neuroscience and mental health, he also emphasizes that science must be guided by ethical principles, particularly the principle of compassion. He argues that scientific research should be conducted with the goal of improving the human condition and alleviating suffering, rather than being driven solely by profit or intellectual curiosity. Ricard's perspective on the ethical responsibility of science is shaped by his Buddhist training, which teaches that all actions should be motivated by the desire to benefit others. He believes that scientists have a moral obligation to consider the ethical implications of their work and to ensure that their research contributes to the greater good. This includes being mindful of the potential consequences of scientific innovations, particularly in fields such as biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and environmental science, where new technologies have the power to shape the future of humanity and the planet. For Ricard, compassionate research involves not only pursuing knowledge but also ensuring that the applications of that knowledge promote well-being and avoid harm. This means that scientists must engage with ethical questions about how their work will impact individuals, society, and the environment. Ricard has called for greater collaboration between scientists and ethicists, as well as between scientific and spiritual traditions, to ensure that research is conducted in a way that is aligned with values of compassion and altruism, animal rights and environmental ethics. Expanding the circle of compassion. One of the most significant ethical implications of Ricard's work is his call for an expanded circle of compassion that includes not only humans but all sentient beings, including animals. In his book A Plea for the Animals, Ricard makes a compelling argument for the ethical treatment of animals. Drawing on both scientific research and Buddhist teachings to advocate for a more compassionate and respectful relationship with non-human life, Ricard argues that the way humans treat animals reflects a broader ethical failure to recognize the interconnectedness of all life. He believes that the widespread exploitation of animals, whether for food, entertainment, or experimentation, stems from a lack of empathy and compassion, as well as a failure to recognize the intrinsic value of all sentient beings. In Ricard's view, compassion is not limited to humans but must extend to all beings capable of experiencing suffering. Ricard's advocacy for animal rights is closely linked to his concern for environmental sustainability. He argues that the environmental crises we face, from climate change to habitat destruction, are rooted in the same mindset of exploitation and disconnection that leads to the mistreatment of animals. By cultivating compassion for all living beings, Ricard believes that we can develop a more sustainable and ethical relationship with the planet, one that prioritizes the well-being of ecosystems and the preservation of biodiversity. Ricard's environmental ethics are grounded in the Buddhist principle of interdependence, which teaches that all beings are interconnected and that the well-being of one depends on the well-being of all. He argues that recognizing this interdependence is essential for addressing the ecological challenges of our time and for creating a more sustainable and compassionate future. Compassion and global governance, a new ethical framework. Ricard's ethical vision extends beyond individuals and institutions to the global level, where he calls for a new framework of governance that is rooted in compassion and altruism. He argues that the current systems of global governance, whether political, economic, or environmental, are often driven by short-term self-interest, competition, and the pursuit of power, leading to widespread suffering and inequality. In place of this, Ricard advocates for a global ethic based on the recognition of our shared humanity and the interconnectedness of all life. This ethic would prioritize the well-being of all people, animals, and the planet, and would guide decisions at all levels of governance. Ricard believes that by adopting a more compassionate approach to global governance, we can address the root causes of many of the world's most pressing problems, from poverty and inequality to climate change and conflict. Ricard's call for compassionate global governance reflects his broader belief in the potential for ethical transformation on a global scale. He argues that by cultivating compassion and altruism in individuals, communities, and institutions, we can create a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world, one where the well-being of all beings is prioritized over narrow self-interest. Compassion and altruism as ethical foundations for a better world. Matthieu Ricard's work on compassion and altruism offers a powerful ethical framework for addressing the challenges of our time. His teachings emphasize that true happiness and fulfillment come not from pursuing individual success but from living in service to others and working to alleviate suffering. This ethical vision is rooted in the recognition of our interconnectedness and the belief that compassion is not just a personal virtue but a moral responsibility. Ricard's advocacy for compassion and altruism has profound implications for how we approach issues of social justice, environmental sustainability, and global governance. His work challenges us to rethink our values and to adopt a more expansive ethical perspective, one that prioritizes the well-being of all beings and recognizes the importance of acting with empathy, responsibility, and care. Ricard's ethical philosophy offers a vision of a better world, one where individuals and societies are guided by compassion and altruism, and where the collective well-being of humanity and the planet is placed at the forefront of all decisions. Through his life and work, Ricard has inspired millions to embrace this vision and to recognize that ethical transformation is not only possible but essential for the future of humanity. Global advocacy and environmentalism. Matthieu Ricard's commitment to environmentalism is deeply rooted in his Buddhist principles, particularly the teachings on interdependence, compassion, and ethical responsibility. His global advocacy for environmental sustainability is not just a reflection of his personal beliefs but an extension of his broader ethical framework, which emphasizes the interconnectedness of all life and the moral obligation to care for the earth and its inhabitants. Ricard's environmental advocacy spans from promoting animal rights to calling for urgent action on climate change, all grounded in a deep understanding that the well-being of humans, animals, and the planet are intrinsically linked. Ricard's work in this area is informed by both his scientific background and his Buddhist training. As a former molecular geneticist, he has a deep appreciation for the scientific evidence regarding the environmental crises we face. However, it is his spiritual perspective that frames these issues in a broader ethical context, advocating for a transformation in human consciousness that emphasizes compassion for all living beings and a recognition of the planet as a shared home. Through his writings, speeches, and humanitarian work, Ricard has emerged as a leading voice in the call for a more compassionate and sustainable relationship with the natural world, the Buddhist concept of interdependence, a foundation for environmentalism. At the heart of Ricard's environmental advocacy is the Buddhist concept of pratitya samutpada, or interdependence. This teaching holds that all phenomena arise in dependence upon a multitude of causes and conditions, and that nothing exists in isolation. In practical terms, this means that all beings and ecosystems are interconnected, and the actions of one can have far-reaching effects on the whole. This concept aligns closely with the ecological understanding that human activities impact the environment and, by extension, all life on Earth. For Ricard, the recognition of interdependence is essential for developing a more ethical and sustainable approach to environmental issues. The modern environmental crisis, characterized by climate change, deforestation, pollution, and biodiversity loss, can be traced, in large part, to the mistaken belief that humans are separate from nature and that the planet's resources exist solely for human consumption. Ricard argues that this worldview is not only destructive but also fundamentally flawed, as it fails to recognize the deep interconnections between humans, animals, and the environment. In his writings, Ricard emphasizes that a shift in consciousness is required, one that acknowledges our interdependence with the natural world and fosters a sense of responsibility for its well-being. This shift, he argues, is not just a practical necessity but a moral imperative. As the degradation of the environment leads to immense suffering, particularly for vulnerable populations and future generations. By cultivating a mindset of compassion and interconnectedness, Ricard believes that individuals and societies can begin to take meaningful action to protect the planet and ensure a sustainable future for all. Animal rights, expanding compassion to all sentient beings. A key aspect of Ricard's environmental advocacy is his call for a re-evaluation of humanity's relationship with animals. In his book A Plea for the Animals, Ricard makes a compelling case for the ethical treatment of animals, arguing that the exploitation and mistreatment of animals is not only morally wrong but also deeply connected to broader environmental issues. He calls for an expanded circle of compassion that includes all sentient beings, urging people to recognize the intrinsic value of animals and their capacity to suffer. Ricard's advocacy for animal rights is grounded in the Buddhist principle of ahimsa, non-harming, which teaches that all beings, human and non-human alike, deserve respect and protection from harm. He argues that the widespread mistreatment of animals, whether in factory farming, industrial fishing, or other forms of exploitation, is a reflection of humanity's broader disconnection from nature and its failure to recognize the suffering of other beings. One of Ricard's key arguments is that the exploitation of animals is not only unethical but also environmentally destructive. Factory farming, in particular, is a major contributor to environmental degradation, accounting for significant greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, water pollution, and biodiversity loss. Ricard advocates for a plant-based diet as a way to reduce the environmental impact of food production and to live more compassionately in alignment with the ethical principle of non-harming. In addition to advocating for changes in individual behavior, Ricard calls for systemic reforms to protect animals from exploitation and abuse. He supports stronger animal welfare laws and regulations, as well as efforts to raise awareness about the suffering of animals in industrial farming and other sectors. By expanding the circle of compassion to include animals, Ricard believes that humanity can create a more ethical and sustainable relationship with the natural world. Climate change, a call for urgent action. Ricard has been a vocal advocate for urgent action on climate change, viewing the issue as one of the greatest moral challenges of our time. He argues that climate change is not just an environmental issue but a humanitarian crisis, as its effects disproportionately impact the poorest and most vulnerable populations. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and food and water shortages threaten the lives and livelihoods of millions, exacerbating existing inequalities and driving mass displacement. Ricard frames climate change as a moral issue that demands a compassionate response. He emphasizes that those who contribute least to the problem, such as people in low-income countries, are often the most affected, while the wealthier nations and industries responsible for the majority of emissions continue to prioritize economic growth over environmental sustainability. This, Ricard argues, is a fundamental injustice that must be addressed through a combination of individual action, policy change, and global cooperation. At the individual level, Ricard encourages people to adopt more sustainable lifestyles, reducing their carbon footprint through measures such as reducing meat consumption, minimizing energy use, and supporting renewable energy sources. However, he also recognizes that individual actions alone are not enough to address the scale of the climate crisis. He advocates for systemic changes, including stronger international agreements to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the implementation of carbon pricing, and investment in clean energy technologies. Ricard's advocacy for climate action is informed by both scientific evidence and his Buddhist values. He believes that compassion for future generations and for the planet itself should drive efforts to mitigate climate change and transition to a more sustainable economy. In his view, the current trajectory of environmental destruction is not only unsustainable but also unethical, as it prioritizes short-term gains over the long-term well-being of humanity and the Earth. Environmental justice, the intersection of compassion and social equity. Ricard's environmental advocacy is closely linked to his commitment to social justice. He emphasizes that environmental issues cannot be separated from questions of equity and fairness, as the impacts of environmental degradation, whether from pollution, deforestation, or climate change, disproportionately affect marginalized and vulnerable communities. For Ricard, environmental justice means recognizing the intersectionality of these issues and addressing the root causes of both environmental and social inequality. In advocating for environmental justice, Ricard draws attention to the ways in which economic and political systems contribute to both environmental destruction and social inequity. He argues that the global economy, driven by the pursuit of profit and consumption, is inherently unsustainable and leads to the exploitation of both natural resources and human labor. In this context, environmental degradation is not just an ecological issue but a symptom of a broader ethical failure to prioritize the well-being of people and the planet over short-term economic gain. Ricard calls for a more compassionate approach to environmental governance, one that centers the needs of the most vulnerable and seeks to address the systemic inequalities that drive both environmental harm and social injustice. This includes supporting policies that promote sustainable development, protect the rights of indigenous peoples, and ensure access to clean air, water, and other natural resources for all communities. By framing environmental issues in terms of justice and equity, Ricard highlights the ethical dimensions of sustainability and calls for a more holistic approach to addressing the global environmental crisis. His vision of environmental justice is one where compassion, fairness, and sustainability are the guiding principles of both individual behavior and public policy, a call for global cooperation and compassionate leadership. In his global advocacy, Ricard emphasizes the need for international cooperation and compassionate leadership to address the environmental challenges facing humanity. He argues that the scale of the environmental crisis requires coordinated global action, as no single nation or community can solve these problems in isolation. This is particularly true for climate change, which transcends national borders and requires collective efforts to reduce emissions, protect ecosystems, and transition to renewable energy. Ricard calls for leaders to adopt a more compassionate approach to environmental governance, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of all life and prioritizes the long-term well-being of the planet over short-term political and economic interests. He believes that compassionate leadership involves not only making decisions that benefit the present generation but also considering the needs of future generations and the health of the environment. In advocating for global cooperation, Ricard points to the success of international agreements such as the Paris Agreement, which seeks to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. However, he also acknowledges the challenges of implementing such agreements, particularly in the face of political and economic pressures. To overcome these challenges, Ricard calls for a shift in values, away from consumerism, competition, and exploitation, and toward compassion, cooperation, and sustainability, environmental advocacy and personal responsibility. While Ricard advocates for systemic change at the global level, he also emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility in addressing environmental issues. He believes that individuals have a moral obligation to reduce their environmental impact and to live in ways that are aligned with the principles of compassion and sustainability. This includes making conscious choices about consumption, waste, and energy use, as well as supporting policies and initiatives that promote environmental protection. Ricard often speaks about the power of individual actions to create ripple effects in society, arguing that small, everyday choices, such as reducing meat consumption, minimizing plastic use, or conserving water, can collectively make a significant difference. He also encourages individuals to educate themselves about environmental issues and to become advocates for change within their own communities. For Ricard, personal responsibility is not about guilt or blame but about living in accordance with ethical principles and recognizing the interconnectedness of all life. He believes that by aligning our actions with our values, we can contribute to a more sustainable and compassionate world, both on an individual and collective level. A vision of compassionate environmentalism. Matthieu Ricard's global advocacy for environmentalism is deeply intertwined with his ethical philosophy of compassion and altruism. He believes that the environmental crises we face, whether in the form of climate change, biodiversity loss, or pollution, are not merely technical problems to be solved but moral challenges that require a fundamental shift in how we relate to the natural world and to each other. Ricard's vision of environmentalism is one that is grounded in the recognition of interdependence and the moral obligation to care for the planet and all its inhabitants. He calls for a compassionate approach to environmental governance, one that prioritizes the well-being of vulnerable populations, future generations, and the ecosystems that sustain life. His work highlights the need for both individual responsibility and collective action, emphasizing that true sustainability requires not only technological innovation but also a transformation in human consciousness. Through his advocacy, Ricard offers a hopeful vision of a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world, one where humanity lives in harmony with the earth and all its creatures, and where the principles of compassion, fairness, and responsibility guide both personal behavior and global leadership. His call for compassionate environmentalism is a reminder that the future of the planet depends not only on the actions we take today but on the values that drive those actions, and that by cultivating compassion, we can create a world that is not only sustainable but also profoundly ethical. The legacy of Ricard's work, mindfulness, compassion, and the future of humanity. Matthieu Ricard's life and work have left an indelible mark on the global conversation surrounding mindfulness, compassion, and the ethical responsibilities of humanity. His unique ability to bridge the worlds of science and spirituality has positioned him as a leading advocate for mental well-being, ethical behavior, and compassionate living. Ricard's legacy lies not only in his teachings on Buddhist philosophy and meditation but also in his profound contributions to scientific research on the effects of mindfulness and compassion, and his tireless advocacy for a more compassionate, sustainable, and just world. Ricard's influence extends across many domains: personal development, education, mental health, social justice, and environmental sustainability, helping to foster a new understanding of what it means to live a life of meaning and purpose in the modern world. Through his writings, humanitarian efforts, and collaborations with scientists, Ricard has championed a vision of humanity that transcends the materialistic, individualistic, and short-sighted goals that often drive contemporary society. His work offers a transformative perspective on human potential, one rooted in the cultivation of inner qualities like mindfulness and compassion, which, he argues, are essential not only for personal well-being but for the survival and flourishing of humanity as a whole. Mindfulness and mental health, a global movement. One of the most enduring aspects of Ricard's legacy is his role in bringing mindfulness and compassion-based practices into the mainstream, particularly in the fields of mental health and education. Over the past few decades, mindfulness has gained widespread recognition as a powerful tool for enhancing mental and emotional well-being. Ricard's work has been instrumental in validating these practices through both personal testimony and scientific collaboration, showing that mindfulness is not just a spiritual exercise but a practical, evidence-based approach to improving mental health. Research conducted on Ricard and other long-term meditators has provided empirical evidence that mindfulness meditation can lead to measurable changes in brain structure and function. These changes, particularly in areas related to emotional regulation, empathy, and stress reduction, have made mindfulness a key component of therapeutic interventions for a range of mental health conditions, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, have been developed and implemented in clinical settings, schools, and workplaces, helping millions of people cultivate greater awareness, emotional resilience, and mental clarity. Ricard's contribution to this movement has been both scientific and philosophical. He has demonstrated that mindfulness is not simply a relaxation technique but a profound practice that can transform the way we experience life. By encouraging people to live in the present moment with greater awareness and compassion, mindfulness fosters a deeper connection to oneself and to others, helping to alleviate the mental and emotional suffering that often arises from stress, fear, and attachment. Ricard's work has shown that mindfulness is not only beneficial for individuals but also for society at large, as it promotes emotional intelligence, empathy, and cooperation, qualities essential for harmonious relationships and communities, compassion as the key to human flourishing. While mindfulness has gained significant attention in recent years, Ricard's work has placed an equally strong emphasis on compassion as a foundational practice for personal and collective well-being. He argues that compassion is not just a moral virtue but a skill that can be cultivated through meditation and daily practice. Compassion, Ricard believes, is the antidote to many of the world's most pressing problems, from social inequality to environmental degradation. Through his collaboration with neuroscientists, Ricard has helped to demonstrate that compassion meditation can lead to significant changes in brain function, particularly in areas related to empathy and altruistic behavior. These findings have had far-reaching implications, suggesting that compassion is not a fixed trait but a capacity that can be developed and strengthened over time. By training the mind to focus on the suffering of others and cultivating the desire to alleviate that suffering, individuals can enhance their emotional well-being and contribute to the creation of a more compassionate and just society. Ricard's advocacy for compassion extends beyond the individual level to encompass institutions and public policy. He argues that compassion should be at the heart of social, political, and economic systems, guiding decisions that prioritize the well-being of all people, particularly the most vulnerable. His call for a more compassionate world challenges the competitive, self-centered values that often dominate modern societies, offering instead a vision of cooperation, empathy, and ethical responsibility. Ricard's work on compassion has inspired countless individuals and organizations to adopt practices that promote empathy and altruism. In education, programs that teach compassion and emotional intelligence to children have been shown to improve social skills, reduce bullying, and foster a sense of community. In healthcare, compassion training for professionals has been linked to improved patient outcomes and reduced burnout. And in business, leaders who prioritize compassion and ethical responsibility are creating more humane and sustainable workplaces. The future of humanity, compassion, cooperation, and ethical responsibility. Ricard's vision for the future of humanity is grounded in the belief that compassion, cooperation, and ethical responsibility are essential for addressing the global challenges we face. He argues that humanity is at a crossroads, where the choices we make today will determine the future of our planet and the well-being of future generations. Climate change, social inequality, and environmental degradation are not just technical problems to be solved, they are moral challenges that require a fundamental shift in how we relate to one another and to the natural world. Ricard's call for a more compassionate and ethical approach to global governance reflects his deep understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. He emphasizes that the survival of humanity depends on our ability to recognize this interconnectedness and to act in ways that promote the well-being of all beings. not just ourselves. This includes addressing the root causes of suffering, whether they are social, economic, or environmental, and creating systems that prioritize the long-term health and sustainability of the planet. In advocating for global cooperation, Ricard highlights the importance of compassionate leadership. He believes that leaders who are guided by empathy, ethical responsibility, and a commitment to the common good are essential for creating a more just and sustainable world. Ricard's vision of leadership is one that transcends national borders and political interests, focusing instead on the shared interests of humanity and the planet. He calls for policies that promote environmental protection, social equity, and peace, arguing that these are the foundations of a flourishing future for all. Ricard's work also emphasizes the role of individual responsibility in creating a better future. He encourages people to cultivate mindfulness and compassion in their daily lives, recognizing that small, individual actions can have a ripple effect in society. Whether through personal choices, such as adopting a plant-based diet or reducing one's carbon footprint, or through collective action, such as supporting policies that protect the environment and promote social justice, individuals have the power to contribute to the well-being of the world. The role of science and spirituality in shaping the future. One of the most significant aspects of Ricard's legacy is his ability to bridge the gap between science and spirituality, offering a holistic perspective on the human experience. Ricard's work demonstrates that these two domains, often seen as incompatible, can complement and enrich one another in profound ways. Science, with its empirical methods and focus on objective knowledge, provides valuable insights into the workings of the brain, the body, and the natural world. Spirituality, with its emphasis on inner experience, ethical responsibility, and the cultivation of compassion, offers a deeper understanding of the mind and the nature of existence. Ricard's collaborations with neuroscientists have helped to validate ancient contemplative practices, such as mindfulness and compassion meditation, using modern scientific methods. These studies have shown that meditation can lead to measurable changes in brain function and structure, supporting the idea that the mind is malleable and capable of transformation. Ricard's work has also highlighted the importance of integrating scientific knowledge with ethical considerations, particularly in the fields of mental health, education, and environmental sustainability. As humanity faces unprecedented challenges in the 21st century, Ricard's ability to synthesize scientific and spiritual perspectives offers a blueprint for addressing these challenges in a more holistic and compassionate way. By recognizing the value of both scientific inquiry and spiritual practice, we can create a more balanced and integrated approach to understanding the human mind, promoting well-being, and ensuring the survival of the planet. The humanitarian legacy, a life of service. Beyond his contributions to science and spirituality, Ricard's legacy is also defined by his humanitarian efforts. Throughout his life, Ricard has been deeply committed to improving the lives of others, particularly through his work in education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability. His involvement in the Karunashichen organization, which he co-founded, has provided essential services to underserved communities in Tibet, Nepal, and India, focusing on empowering individuals through education, access to healthcare, and sustainable development. Ricard's humanitarian work reflects his belief that true happiness and fulfillment come from living a life of service to others. His efforts to alleviate suffering and promote well-being are an embodiment of the principles of compassion and altruism that he has advocated throughout his life. Ricard's legacy as a humanitarian serves as a powerful reminder that personal spiritual practice must be accompanied by concrete action to address the suffering of others and to create a more just and equitable world. A vision of hope for the future, Matthieu Ricard's legacy is one of profound compassion, wisdom, and service. His work has inspired millions of people around the world to cultivate mindfulness, practice compassion, and live with greater ethical responsibility. Through his writings, teachings, scientific collaborations, and humanitarian efforts, Ricard has offered a vision of humanity that transcends materialism, competition, and individualism, pointing instead to the transformative power of empathy, cooperation, and ethical action. As humanity confronts the challenges of the 21st century, climate change, social inequality, mental health crises, and environmental degradation. Ricard's teachings offer a path forward rooted in compassion, mindfulness, and a deep sense of interconnectedness. His legacy is not only a call to individual transformation but also a call to collective action, encouraging us to create a world where the well-being of all beings is prioritized, and where compassion and ethical responsibility guide our decisions. Ricard's work is a testament to the potential for human beings to cultivate the best aspects of their nature, compassion, wisdom, and generosity, and to use these qualities to create a more just, sustainable, and flourishing future for all. His life and legacy offer hope for a world where mindfulness and compassion are not only personal practices but also the foundation of a global movement toward a better and more compassionate humanity. Conclusion: the vision for a compassionate world. Matthieu Ricard's vision for a compassionate world is not a distant ideal but an achievable goal through the cultivation of compassion, mindfulness, and ethical responsibility. Ricard believes that by fostering compassion in individuals and institutions, we can address the root causes of suffering, build more just societies, and create a peaceful, sustainable world for all beings. At the heart of his philosophy is the transformative power of compassion for individuals. Compassion is not just a personal virtue but a force that enhances social relationships, encourages cooperation, and brings lasting fulfillment. Ricard argues that institutions, from schools to governments, should be built on the foundation of compassion. Creating policies that serve the common good rather than individual interests, he also advocates for global compassion in addressing issues such as climate change, social justice, and governance. Ricard emphasizes that global leaders must act not only for present interests but also for future generations and the planet. He reminds us that each individual holds responsibility, from small lifestyle changes to participating in movements for environmental and social justice. Ricard's vision for a compassionate world is both a moral ideal and a practical roadmap for addressing the major challenges of our time. His legacy is a reminder that we can build a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world if we all cultivate compassion and live with responsibility.